was your trip away?
It was good. So we left last Monday. We flew into Buffalo. We usually stay 3 or 4 days at my mom's. That's a good limit. We wear them out. They get tired very, very easily. We usually do a lot of Claritin, cats for me and Elisa. So I have some real sinus drainage, not sick, just drainage. And then we were there for the week. Bruce, my brother, came up for Dick's birthday, and we FaceTimed or Zoomed with the family. That was a big hit. And then we went down to Ted Rich's church in Roseville, and I preached there Sunday.
So that's Ohio?
It's northern PA. So went there, and then spent the rest of that day night with my brother-in-law at his place, and it's even worse than my parents with dust and black dog hairs everywhere. So just draining. Sleep much. But and then we went back to the farm. We saw some friends Monday morning in a snowstorm, and we got back to the farm, and we were on the edge of that northeasterner. So I've been right on the edge. So we got about 2 inches of snow yesterday when we left. And I almost said, maybe we shouldn't go. It was pretty sketchy on the mountain. We got off the mountain and it thinned out pretty decent. So our trips are draining, quite frankly. They're not relaxing, but they're needed. And we enjoyed our family. Did a couple walks on that. Pretty boring, actually. Pretty boring. This is a tough time. March is cold up there. It's snow and ice, and there's not much open.
On and off.
That's right. That's right. So our big farm, we went out to a buffalo farm nearby, see some buffalo. That was a big event. And then we went down to the Mennonite store, and I bought a new pair of Carhartt pants. That's a big day. Actually, Oscar pants, but a pair of pants at a discounted price. So that was a big deal.
Oscar, I don't know what Oscar.
Oh, they're the cheap mock-ups.
Oh,
really, really cheap.
but they would be good for changing oil.
For $18, $17, they're worth every penny. Hello. Come on in. So yeah, so we go to the Mennonite store. It's called Edgewood, and we always buy. I get a pair of pants there and a jacket or something. Yeah. So yeah. And then the other big event, we went to a Mennonite store. We had a sandwich and coffee. Yeah. So those are our big events. Yeah. Awesome. Hey, great to have you.
Yes, Mike.
Mike, Will.
Well,
good to have you. Good to have you. Hey, Seth. So, Mike, this is Troy and Seth, father, son.
Troy. Seth. I'm Seth. My name's Troy.
Troy.
Yeah.
Nice and then we have Dennis here. Okay, nice and Dick and Ken. And Mr. Fleming.
I have to write this down.
Yeah. Can we test it at the end? Yeah.
Dennis, thank you. Jones last name.
Dennis Jones.
Dick, I met you last week.
Yeah.
Ken.
Bart.
B-A-R-T. And Seth.
And Troy.
Yeah. And Seth
and you are again?
Will.
Yeah. And your pastor Will?
Yes, right.
Yes.
Well, great.
Yeah, he's that big guy at the other end of the town.
Okay. Where are you from, Mike? Where's home?
We've been here for about 6 years. We're from Florida, South Florida.
Wow.
And my daughter came to one of your events, and she really liked it. Oh. And it's a little bit more exciting than the church we go to for Wednesdays.
Well, that's great.
And
that's good.
Honestly, I just came last week, and you guys made me uncomfortable.
Oh, good.
That's pretty cool.
Good.
You know what I'm saying?
We're trying to make folks feel as awkward as possible. That's our goal. We talk about that.
Yeah, you guys make some very pointed comments that just like, it makes me think, Makes you want to come back. Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah, I'm glad we made you feel uncomfortable. That's a blessing to hear. I know what you're saying. That's healthy.
I missed last week.
Skip was teaching. I was out.
Great teacher.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Good guy. He's a military guy, Air Force. Very disciplined guy. So we've been doing Respectable Sins. I think we could start here now with Mike. We had to wait for you, so Mike's here now. We can start. Okay. So I'm gonna change gears tonight, just subject wise. for a couple of reasons. I'll explain in a moment. But I thought we'd just start in Jude, verse 1. And what I find fascinating, Jude's the half brother of Jesus. So it's interesting just reading this one little chapter, short epistle. Jude likely spoke Aramaic. He obviously spoke and wrote in Greek in this case. May have had some Latin. Who knows how many dialects he may have actually spoken. So sometimes you think of the first century, these people were uneducated and they were, especially the northern Galileans, kind of poor reputation of being a little rough around the edges. But when you read this epistle and you look at the vocabulary that's used and the syntax, the way he puts words together, he's really sharp. He was well trained. And he's writing here, the servant of Jesus Christ and brother of James, to them that are sanctified by God the Father and preserved in Jesus Christ and called, mercy unto you and peace and love be multiplied. And then he's going to get into the purpose of his letter. And he has a thought in mind, and the Holy Spirit's leading him. But almost in midstream, it's like the Holy Spirit said, we're not going to go there. We're going to switch gears. So we were heading down respectable sins. We'll keep doing this. Next week, we'll do the next section, Lord willing, but I'm going to switch gears. In verse 3, it says, Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. So he's saying, look, I was going to write on this topic about the salvation that we all, each year as believers commonly experience. But there's some things that have surfaced recently, and I believe I need to share these things with you and exhort you to earnestly contend for the faith, the body of truth. And he kind of goes down this apologetic path in the rest of the book and deals with false teachers and just how we need to be on guard against them and so on. So the topics we're looking at are very fruitful. Hey, Mark, good evening. Good evening. Oh, you're good. You're good. We're in Jude chapter 1 or chapter, whatever chapter you want in Jude. So I was just sharing how we were going to do the respectful sins tonight, but I'm going to just shift gears. And Jude was shifting gears because there's some things that came into his life he felt he needed to address. So I'm just, my parents, bless their hearts, I go to see them. We're always trying to try to get ahead of it. How do we help them plan ahead, and I watch their lifestyles and just how can we serve them better. And one thing they do, they watch a lot of news, especially in the winter months. They live on a farm. So the summer comes, they'll get out in the fields, and my stepfather's much more active and he hates TV, at least he used to tell me that. But they watch all this news and it just seems like the same drone, one topic repeated over and over and over and over all night. And it's okay. But just watching more news than I maybe normally watch, you get to see all the horrible things going on in the world. And, I don't want to be the doomsayer, the sky is falling, but things could really change. We're talking globally in a day, whether it be economically, whether it be a World War III, whether it be, whatever disaster. And it just seems like we are coming closer to the end of the age, just the end. It just feels like things are escalating in such, intense speeds, and it's hard to keep up with any one topic. It just seems like there's just so many things coming at this world and our country. And you may feel that at your workplace, like there's just so much coming at you. You may feel that with your family.
You don't have time to educate or nothing.
No, you're just numb. You're just spinning, and you're trying to prioritize. Okay, I only have so much time, so many resources. Which one of these topics do we? What's the priorities? What's the topics you address? And it's very, very challenging. So I'm just watching things going around, and there's a question that folks who like to say prophecy have wrestled with, at least from our Christian American perspective, is where's America in the end times? Where's America in the Bible? What role will it play? And we've enjoyed 200 plus years of the rise of America, in many ways an unparalleled situation in history. The only country that may rival it would be Israel when they had their A game going at times. But we've had this incredible country. God has blessed, and so many things they're good. And then all of a sudden, things are tail spinning. But when things are so good, you're thinking, here's the Bible. Where's America? It's talking about Russia. It talks about China. It talks about Iraq and Iran and Northern Africa, and on and on and on it goes. Where is America? Where's America? And up until recent months, years, perhaps people have their answers, but the answer may be glaring. We're just not as strong as we once were. Is maybe we're not that dominant world. Remember, we're still a player, but maybe we're not the dominant power. Maybe we're not the dominant power. And if the Lord tarries X number of days, weeks, months, years, if it's more and more like the years, then we may become less and less and less influential. So I thought I would just share what the Bible does say about prophecy regarding international issues. And I thought it'd be helpful just to see, one, America's not a dominant theme in prophecy. We'll see that by its silence, but also to see some patterns, things that you can kind of watch unfolding now a little bit, just some of the trends. So anyway, that's Jude, just where Jude was going one way. I was going to go one way tonight, but I just feel burdened to share just some other thoughts. So let's go to the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24. Let's just start there. And the Lord has spent 3.5 years with these men, these 12. And he's covered a lot of topics, just a lot of topics, from theology to very practical things, very comprehensive training. He's going to turn this future entity called the church over to these men. They're going to be the foundational pieces to this spiritual edifice. And so he's trying to make sure that they're not lacking anything in their training. And as he's winding up near to the end of his earthly work and coming really into the Passion Week very soon, they leave the temple, verse 1, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, "See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." So as he's walking out, and this is a beautiful building, even the remains of it today, I still think are awe-inspiring. It's been destroyed over 22 times. So it's hard to picture it in its prime. The way it works, you get beat up and you don't dig stuff up, you just put more dirt in it and build on top of it. It's a prime, location. So you just fill the dirt in, you build it up, and then it gets destroyed, and you build it up. So when you're there, you're looking down sometimes a wall, and you can see the different stones. The Jebusites, who are the founders of the city, they use a certain stone for the wall. So you can see where the Jebusite stones ended and where the next period of history, another type of stone. And the Herodian stones are stones that are squared, and they have like a little, I don't know what you would call this, framing on them. I don't know what the fancy word is, but what is it called?
Chamfer? Is it like a notched or a cornered edge?
Border of some.
It's a border of some type, and it was his signature rock. So when you get to see those, that was Herod the Great. So you get to see this beautiful, beautiful city. And Herod, of course, is just building this thing up. He doesn't like the Jews, but he wants to have peace with them. So he's investing, and they leave this incredible edifice. And Jesus says, all these stones, every one of them is going to be torn down. And when you see these stones, I mean, some of them are larger than this table. I mean, you're talking tons and tons of stones. And this thing goes up 100, 150 feet here, 220 feet here. It's a big building. And so these guys are looking up saying, this is going to come down, really? And of course, we know just some 40 years after the statement, they all came down. They all came down, So, that's when the Romans basically put the city under siege for 3.5 years. There's Titus and his men. And you got a zealous Roman soldier shoots a firebrand into the temple area. It strikes, hits wood, thing gets hot. out of control fire, and the heat melts the gold, a lot of gold. And the gold is like a river streaming between the cracks and the stones. And Titus lost control of his men. I mean, there's gold flowing. Flowing. And so they literally, in their zeal, took every stone down to take the gold out between the cracks. They all come out. And it is fun when you hit school. We have a friend who owns a mine up near the gambling sites, the High D mine next to the Pittsburgh mine. And they let us go in there, and they have a really great shaft where there's really nice, it's very rich ore. And they give you Dixie cups, so it's minimal mining. But you can go down and you see this gold, it's not just pure gold, it's all kinds of stuff with it. But you get to chisel that out and put it in your thing, man, that's really hot stuff. This is really high quality gold, just streaming. Okay. So these guys are listening to him. That's a future statement he makes. And then they go out of the city, and what's neat, in the first century, there was a monster ramp bridge from the eastern gate right across the Kidron Valley, pretty decent valley, and about almost I'd say 3/4 mile bridge that ties into about a third of the way up the Mount of Olives. So it was good egress, nice way to enter into the city. You come off the mount, come down from Bethany, off the mount, come down the valley, multiple ways you have access to it, come in. So he walks across there, and he's going to go up the Mount of Olives, and he's likely going to go to Bethany, where last week especially, he's spending the night there with his men. Sometimes they're in that garden right there on the mount. So they go across, and they go up this hill, and the Mount of Olives is just a few hundred feet taller than Jerusalem. Otherwise, Jerusalem would be the tallest peak. And so they go up to the top. In verse 3. He sat down upon the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came unto him privately, saying, "Tell us, when shall these things be?" You said something pretty significant here about judgment in the temple, and then they're trying to put a timeline on these things. And what shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world, or end of the age? So pretty loaded question. Good question. Jesus wanted that question. He knows how to draw questions out of people. He wants to talk on this about the future. And so this is known technically as the Olivet Discourse. And he's going to spend a lot of time talking about the end times from this location. If you're familiar with your Old Testament and prophecy, Jerusalem plays a significant part in the second coming. It's the epicenter of his actions. Christ's actions when he comes again. And the Mount of Olives has already been predicted in Zechariah 14, verses 1-4, talks about the end times and how the Messiah would come to the Mount of Olives and would go from there through the eastern gate into the city and establish his authoritative reign on the earth. And that includes a number of things that happen. But it states he will come to that point, the Mount of Olives. And when he comes, that text talks about an earthquake taking place when he comes. And obviously, there's a lot of faults in that region of the world, not moral faults, geological faults. In fact, it's impossible to get an insurance policy if you want to build a new building on the Mount of Olives. It's just a time bomb. But that's a major earthquake that's going to take place to the point it will open up a ravine basically from the bed to the dead. And for the first time in Israel's history, their capital will be have water access. Very unusual in ancient world. Almost all the capitals are on water. Jerusalem, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you build it where they did, other than high altitude? But anyway, so you have a lot of predictions in the Old Testament. So when Jesus talks through the Mount of Olives, he's almost within every verse referencing or alluding to Old Testament teachings. And he's just going to give it more clarity, a little more definition, a little more information. So the first thing he's going to talk about in verse 4 is, I want you guys, he's going to say, I don't want you to get tricked. I don't want you to be deceived. Don't be gullible. This topic of the end times, he's saying, it's going to lend itself to a lot of false teaching. Take heed that no man deceive you for this purpose. For many shall come in my name, saying, I'm Christ, and shall deceive many. So I'm always leery. You know, a lot of sensational teaching out there and sensational books that are written, and they make money off of these films. All I can say is what he says here: be careful, be careful. You know, with all of us, we're merely men. You know, so the right attitude. Acts 17 talks about being, you know, teachable but not gullible. Be teachable but not gullible. So anyway, he talks about, you know, don't be deceived, and he's talking about there's going to be false teachers and false messiahs, people who claim to be the Christ, and so we can anticipate in the end times more of this escalating, more of these false teachers giving themselves a high grade, being the Christ. Okay. But then the thing that really has caught my attention, you know, again this week, and you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. So, you know, to prepare our people, we're not going to live in fear. We're not doing that. We're going to live by faith. You know, the just shall live by faith. We're saved by faith. We live by faith. With time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Psalm 56:3. I'm not going to live in fear. Not doing it. What we do see here is we're going to hear of wars, the potential of wars, reality of wars. So both the reality and potentiality is stressed here. You're going to hear of wars happening, and then the possibility of a war happening. So right now, what rumors are you hearing? Just what are some things, rumors, possibilities? What combinations do you see?
Russians are going to go into Moldova. That's what the thing that they're in the Ukraine. They're going to think about that.
All right, so Russia doesn't seem to be satisfied with what they've done. They want more.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're hearing almost weekly another advance. And the question, of course, is Putin being content with Ukraine if he solidifies that as a victory? Does he go to whatever? I don't know, but there's rumors. Okay, what else?
I saw Honduras is one to team up or ally with China. That was a flash on my phone earlier in the day.
Yeah,
Just rather than Taiwan.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an odd pairing.
An odd pairing. Yeah, we don't usually think much about South America, but there are other countries that are investing. China.
South America's not mentioned either. Is it?
No, it's not.
This whole hemisphere.
The whole hemisphere. Yep.
Right. World War. Another world war.
Yeah. World means with everyone playing. Man, I wasn't born in the 40s. I was late 50s. Some of you guys were. Dick, you were born in 42. So you're a World War II baby.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And I think you're the only one in that era. Yeah, you're it. Online. Yeah, you're it. Paula Duke.
Yep, he's older than I am.
Yeah. So, you know, we study the war. I love war history. I like reading about it. I like studying it. But man, I can't imagine World War II. It was horrible. What a devastating. You know, World War I, the war that ended all wars. You know, we had World War II shortly after. So yeah, that rumor, could this escalate to that magnitude? Okay, what other wars? Rumors, just rumors. I mean, you're hearing them almost every day.
I'm still hearing that China's gearing up for a major war footing with Taiwan. I'm still hearing that. But
I think that's a
thing.
very fair rumor. It's a rumor.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Right. Yeah. Set off your toast. Right. China
That's
thinks
a
that they
gold
belong to
nugget right there.
So what did China do with Hong Kong? Yeah. So they took that back and enforce and control. Yeah. So whatever. So the point is, as we enter into this maybe last little time period, nearing the coming of the Lord, it's telling us something. This is the conditions of the world, and that's really difficult. How do you plan? You know, how do you plan life when things are caving in at a global magnitude? It's challenging. Okay, so we have wars, rumors, wars, and he says here, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And when you study the Olivet Discourse, he doesn't really reference the rapture. So he doesn't talk about that as much as he talks about the revelation. We'll make a distinction of those in a moment. But so we see here in Jesus's mind, this chapter is being placed over 7 years. So in his mind, as he teaches this chapter, he's thinking of the tribulation, And what's fascinating, when you go to the book of Revelation and study chapters 6, 7, and 8, those various seal judgments follow exactly the order of topics that Jesus has. So it's like John is taking the outline and putting the bones on it, the flesh on it. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So these wars, we've always had wars since, we had it at a microcosm with the first murder on the earth. So wars and rumors of wars is not we've had that. But the point is, it's going to be a unique escalation, unparalleled. It's kind of a drift you're going to get for the passages. So we have this beginning. I'm going to say the beginning here is at the beginning of the tribulation. And at the beginning of the tribulation, John is going to write about some wars. And I'm going to put in the Northern Confederation War. I'm going to put into this text and place it in the beginning of the tribulation. And so that is the war with Russia. So Ezekiel 38 talks about a war with Russia. And I'm going to place that chronologically at the beginning of the tribulation. Does that mean there's escalation before that? Could that be? Sure. But the details of the prophecy are relegated to the tribulation. We'll look at that. Then he goes on, verse 7, for nation shall rise against nation. Okay, this Mike just said it, fear or rumor of world war. This is world war. For nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. This is a huge stair step up, enormous amount. Now we've had that in the past, but this again is a unique time period where it's just going to be at its worst, at its zenith. And there should be famines. Okay, we've had famines throughout history. We've had pestilences. We've had earthquakes in diverse places. But the impression is, at the beginning of the tribulation, these things are going to really ramp up, where it's just like, whoa, I can't keep up with the news cycle. It's an earthquake here. There's a famine here. There's a war here. There's a tsunami here. There's a volcanic action here. It's just like, I just can't keep up with it. Just wave upon wave upon wave. So that's kind of the intensity of the passage. And Jesus says, now these are just the beginning of sorrows. He uses the word birth pains, like a woman ready to deliver a baby. It's just at the beginning of the delivery, it's very painful. And you guys have been with your wife and she's had a baby, you know what that is, birth pains are like, very hard at first.
And they come faster and faster.
And they come faster and faster. Yes, a perfect parallel. And then he says, then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted and shall kill you. And you should be hated of all nations. I'm going to take that literally, all nations. That means there's not the exception. So when I think of that as it relates to America, we're seeing a passage on intense persecution of believers. And there doesn't seem to be a haven of rest anywhere. Whereas for our country, which we love, we have had men and folks who fought for our freedoms and still are. So we would have these freedoms of religion, First Amendment rights. We've had these. And now all nations are opposed to the Christian. All nations are turning the heat up against this group of people. So I don't want to discourage you, but if I understand this properly, things are not going to get, there may be pockets of better, there may be revival here or there. I'm not opposed to that, I love that. But I'm seeing at this time period, tremendous persecution of believers universally. So kind of a marked out group of people who are going to be basically sought after and hunted to extinction nearly. And then shall many be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. So it's kind of a repeated theme there. And then he says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. So just some really weird stuff going on, very unnatural affections and just bizarre behavior. But then he says, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. So there will be people through this tribulation who will trust the Lord and who will survive it. Maybe a small group, but there will be some. And then in the context of the tribulation, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So, so for our mission viewpoint, we should put as our mission statement, we want to get the gospel to every person. That's a great goal. And but right now, that's not happening right now. Despite all the churches around the country and world trying, there are still untold millions of people who've never heard the gospel, never heard. So the question is, what makes this time period of the tribulation different than today, where it says every human being is going to hear the gospel? So what's the difference between now, which is our goal to win everyone, or at least point everyone to Christ, and this time period? What makes the difference? And there's at least three answers to that.
44,000 preachers.
Okay, so Revelation 7 kicks in when John describes this tribulation, and John asks the question, will anyone live? Will there be anyone saved? And he's then told, yes, there'll be these 144,000 Jews. What cult claims that they're the 144,000? Jehovah's Witnesses, yeah. It's clearly 12,000 from each Jewish tribe. But whatever, so you have 144,000, basically Apostle Paul's on fire for God. But before them, there's two other witnesses that really, I think, spark it all. And they're the two witnesses of Revelation 11 that minister and preach in Jerusalem for the first 3.5 years. And then later, it's interesting, unparalleled in history of the church, the gospel is preached by an angel. And usually that's gospel preaching is assigned to us. So what's going to happen between the preaching of the 144,000 and their subsequent converts, the preaching of the two witnesses, that's very much an item, and God using other means that he hasn't used like this. Everyone hears. And I take that again, literally, everyone's going to have an opportunity. So that's a good thing about the tribulation. At least people hear that Christ died for them, was buried, rose again, and offers the gift of salvation. That's good news. So basically, God is trying to get a world to turn to him and is giving more light to that truth than ever before at a universal level. So there's going to be two choices on the shelf in the tribulation. It's Christ or Antichrist. So it's your two choices. And there's pressure being put on one. One is being pressured. People are being pressured to follow Antichrist through fear. People being pressured to trust Jesus through love. Big contrast. So he gives you this statement of some hope. There will be a gospel witness. And then he drops into a prophecy that Daniel wrote. And Daniel's going to write a lot about the end times. So when you study Daniel's prophecies, chapter 4, chapter 7, chapter 11, he's writing it. Daniel's doing something, just supernatural. He is writing about the biggest kingdoms. He's talking about, the Babylonians and the Persians and the Medes and the Greeks and the Romans. And then he talks about how the end times will look. So he's just scanning way down time and dropping all this information. And he's going to share things at each of those levels, what the world will look like, when the Greeks take control. And he prophesies about Alexander the Great. Okay, before Alexander was even born, it's just overwhelming, when Alexander was going from Syria to Egypt, you always have to go for Israel, always go for Israel. And Alexander, a young man, a lot of ambition, and he's just destroying, he's just bulldozing everything in his way. And he's coming from Syria down the King's Highway right to Jerusalem. He's going to destroy it, and then he's going to Egypt. And that's about all that's left. Okay. So he comes, and of course the Jews are just, we're toast. And the priests got out the scroll of Daniel. They knew that Daniel wrote about the Grecian people and a leader of Greece, and who will conquer and leave his kingdom to 4 generals. So if you know the history of Greece, when Alexander dies at 33 and a half, the kingdom, his kingdom, the Grecian Empire, is turned over to 4 of his generals. That's all predicted by, that's all in Daniel chapter 11. So what happened with the Jews, they decided rather than just lock down in the city, let's just open the gates. Let's send out an ensemble of men with the scroll of Daniel and say that our God of heaven knows all about you. In fact, predicted these things about you before you were born, and give to him the scroll of Daniel as a gift. And maybe it would be a peace agreement. So they went out, met Alexander's men. There was a meeting with Alexander. They showed the evidence from the scriptures. And Alexander basically gave them clemency, saying, this is incredible. What's another God? This is great. This Jehovah is a good God. And of course, these are very, multiple God people. What's another God? That's great. We'll honor that. So that's why Jerusalem wasn't destroyed. So you have these incredible predictions going on, but there's also statements about the tribulation. And the key with Daniel, he writes about what is called the 70 weeks. And the word for weeks in the Hebrew language is the word sevens. So it's literally 70 sevens. And the context will determine if it's days, weeks, or years. So when you study it out, it's technically years. So he writes about 490 years. He tells you what's going to happen after 483 years. He tells you how it's going to work. He's going to say, Israel's going to come back to Jerusalem. There will be a decree signed. When that decree is signed to rebuild the temple, start the clock, because 483 years from there, Messiah will be cut off. And the verb used there is a violent death in Daniel 9. So if you knew your Old Testament, you knew the year. Once that was triggered by the decree, you knew the year Jesus would die. You knew the year. If you knew prophecy, you knew he would die on the Passover. And if you knew it, if you knew your Levitical calendar, you knew it was the Passover, 3 o'clock, you knew the year. Okay. But what Daniel then stops, he describes the last 7 years, and that is down the road called the tribulation. And now this is where Jesus picks it up from Daniel, verse 15. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So that title, abomination of desolation, Daniel's already used that in another prophecy to describe Antiochus Epiphanes III. So Antiochus Epiphanes III is going to come in off when Alexander dies. Click a few years ahead. You're going to have a Syrian general come again for Jerusalem. This time he stops and conquers the temple and sets up a shrine for his pagan god. And he sacrifices a pig on the altar of the Jews, which is definitely not kosher. And he was there. He sieged the city for 3.5 years, and it was a 7-year window altogether. Very interesting. And he was abominable. Okay, so we have a prototype of Antichrist. We have a prototype foreshadowing what the Antichrist would be like and even worse. So he's not talking about Antiochus here. He's talking about someone else. He's talking about one who's going to stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. He's saying, look, I'm telling you something here. Go back in and study it out and read what I'm saying, because in the tribulation, in the middle part of it, there will be this individual who will surface in Jerusalem, in the temple, claiming to be God. So what happens, as we look at this particular picture, right now, Israel does not have a temple. So when I'm looking at the end times, big picture end times, that building's not there. It's not there. For it, you have different groups of different sects of Judaism, and there's one branch. They want to build it. They're ready to go. They want to build. The problem is, what's the problem with the area? What's the problem? Yeah, it's dominated and run by Muslims. And I've walked on that place. They're rude. They don't want you. They don't want Christians or Jews up there. They hate you. So there's plenty of room to build a temple there, next to the two mosques, there's two mosques. There's a public corporate worship mosque and a private one. There's room. They could agree on that, but probably other plans were made. So as I watch and listen to things, depending who's in leadership, they'll be aggressive or not. So for instance, right now with the deal going down with Saudi Arabia and Iran, and things are escalating there on a nuclear level, there would be different Jewish leaders who would say we can't tolerate that. We will be blown into oblivion if we don't do something. So often the Jews, they're brilliant, and they're typically peace-seeking at first. When you study their modern history, they're peace-seeking at first. And then when those measures are not working, then they try to sell land, and then they try to negotiate land deals. So they try to do peaceful deals, normally through some whatever arrangement, and then they give away their land. And then when they realize that's not working, then they blow you up and get proactive. So here's a rumor, will we see Israel right now saying, look, America doesn't have our back right now. Things are escalating in Iran. They hate us, and their mission is to destroy us. Do we let them get to that point and have that threat on us, or do we go preemptively? That's a rumor. That they could very easily go preemptive. They just blow the thing up. Okay, they could blow it up. They have the capability to do it. So let's just say for a rumor, what if they blow the thing up? What's then the reaction? What's going to happen then? They take out Iran's abilities to finish up their nuclear deals. How's the world react to that?
That's Russia's ally.
It's Russia's ally. Okay. And they just became allies in a strange way with who?
China.
And who else? China brokered the deal, but who else? Saudi Arabia. Okay. So there's some really weird bedfellows here, but they all have in common a hatred for America and a hatred for Israel. That they do have in common. After that, they hate each other as much as whatever other groups are pretty hostile. But what if there's this rumor that Israel goes preemptive strike? Would you blame them?
No, I wouldn't.
And it's your survival.
Militarily, it makes sense.
It does. I mean, after going through all other means, you try. But I think they're seeing the handwriting on the wall. They're obviously very concerned for the relationships around the world. So when I'm thinking of international wars, I would keep how does whatever happening in Europe affect Israel. So I would always keep Israel at the apple of your eye in interpreting everything. How will this affect potentially Israel? Because the prophetic plan of God is working through Israel. Okay. So just watch that. So I'm watching how's this going to escalate with Israel. If they take out that thing, who's going to jump on their back? Okay. Because what you're going to see is Israel is going to be in a unique situation when we turn to it in a moment. Okay, Troy, go ahead.
I think Mike had a question that I have.
I'm sorry, Troy.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Mike, go ahead.
You referenced at that time Israel pulled out the scrolls, handed the scrolls
Yes.
to Daniel.
Yes.
And they recognized that the prophecy was this was going to happen.
Yep.
The Jews don't acknowledge the New Testament now. What is the prophecy in terms of their surviving according to the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Can they now pull out a scroll and say, hey, don't worry about Iran, we're going to live?
Yeah, the scroll's not very encouraging. So we can read it here in Zechariah. So Zechariah is going to make a prediction about this 7-year tribulation. And what he's going to say is that only 1 out of 3 Jews will survive it. So let's say there's 18 million Jews right now in the world. That means 6 million will survive. So World War II, you had 18 million Jews approximately in the world, and 2/3 were killed. 1/3 was killed. 1/3 was killed. 6 million Jews and others. The tribulation, 2/3 of the Jews will be killed. And that reference here, let me give that to you. You have the war on Jerusalem in chapter 12 of Zechariah. It shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come up against Jerusalem. So to answer Michael's question on that point, I said, well, that's good news. that the end of the story is good. At the end of the story, Jesus comes at the end of the tribulation, and it's an amazing, salvation, deliverance, rescue of a nation. I'm looking for the passage that talks about the 2 out of 3. Let me see here real quick. It's in the latter chapters, 9, 10, 11. Yeah. It's fun. I'm reading over prophecy after prophecy, the prediction that he'd be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver there, 11, 12. Yeah, let me just see one other thing here.
Chapter 13, 8.
Okay, would you read it?
That's right, I got a note.
Oh, yeah.
And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts thereof shall be cut off and die, but a third shall be left therein.
Yeah, there you go. And I'll bring the third part through the fire, and the fire is the tribulation. And we'll refine them as silver is refined, and we'll try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I'll say, it's my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. And what you basically have here is a third of the nation will be preserved, to answer your question from this text. And Romans 11, 26, 27 tells us that Jesus is coming, and he talks about all of Israel will be saved. So whatever's left when he returns, there's a turning to him, or they call upon his name. So World War I prepared the Jews for the land. World War II got the Jews back into the land. World War III prepares the Jews to accept Jesus as their Messiah. So every war has a purpose for Israel, big purpose. The challenge with Israel for the Jews. So when we think of the Bible and the Jews, let's just talk about that for a moment. So most Jews are very liberal theologically, very liberal. You wonder, why are these American Jews voting for liberal Democrats, let's say, who are anti-Israel? You say, what in the world? These are your people biologically, genetically. But they're anti-Israel. And unfortunately, that's a large portion of American Jews. So you have that bunch. They're theologically liberal, they're politically liberal, and they're not patriots, their own people. Then you have another branch of Judaism that's law bent. That Pharisaic, the Orthodox Jews, the Hasidim Jews, the Orthodox. That's a small group. There are guys, when you fly around the country, you'll see them with their hair and the hats and black whatever on, and their phylacteries. They love their country, but they deny the New Testament. They don't believe Jesus is Messiah at all. And out of that group, they are in the Bible to some degree. And a branch of that group believes that there is the promise that Messiah will come, that there will be an individual Messiah, a person. It's not Jesus. In fact, Messiah hasn't come, but he is coming. So when you're over there in Israel, we had a Jewish guy one night, and he was saying how Messiah is coming to Jerusalem, and he was going through these prophecies. I'm thinking that's true, but it's Jesus. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. And then you have Messianic Jews, which are Jews who believe the Bible and the New Testament, and Jesus was the Messiah. So I'm oversimplifying it, but there's 4 groups of Judaism. So for most of them, they don't care about most. They could care less what the Bible says, and especially New Testament. But there will be a portion of Jews saved. Now, what that means, what read there, 2 out of 3 are be killed. So by what means are they going to be killed? So let's say they do a preemptive, the Lord return, there's a tribulation begin. Wars and rumors, probably a lot of it's just militarily, just war. Targeting him. Antichrist will target him. Especially the second half of the tribulation called Jacob's trouble. So basically, back to the Matthew passage, you have the Antichrist being described here, showing up in that temple. So I'm watching, when is that temple going to be built? And we know it can go up fast. We know it can go up fast because that temple is there at the beginning of the 7 years. It's there because the two witnesses of Revelation 11 are there preaching. And it's fascinating when you study that Revelation 11 passage, it talks about them at the temple. And there's two words for temple in the Greek language, naos and iron. Naos is the Holy of Holies, where you would put your shrine of your God. For the Jews, it would be Yahweh, be the Ark of the Covenant, and God's unique presence there. And then the other one, Iran's the temple in general, the whole complex. So you're going to see these guys ministering there, and John is doing measurements, measure this and measure that, and measuring parts of the temple, but not the courtyard. Not the courtyard. He's told not to measure the courtyard. And so all I can think of is, why doesn't he measure the courtyard? Well, it's because it doesn't belong to the Jews. You don't measure things that aren't yours. And what that might imply is that there's an arrangement made where the Jews have access and use of the temple, but it's in a very compromised situation with others using it and owning it. So maybe some unique arrangement, wouldn't surprise me. So when you see the Antichrist come, then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let them get out of here. If you see this happening, you are going to be the next target as Jewish. Get out of there. No Jewish elements of this discourse. Judea, Sabbath later is referenced. So get out of town. Get to the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down and take anything out of his house. You see this happen. Don't even take time to pack up the family photos. Get out of there. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. I mean, just fly. Your life is at stake. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight may be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. So it's interesting, this isn't fatalistic where it's just everything's going to happen. You have no part in it. Well, here, those living at that time period, pray. You see it coming. If you know the book of Revelation, you can predict what's happening next. 7 seal judgments, 7 trumpet judgments, 7 bowl judgments. You can say, you can predict this is what's going to happen next and where. And when you're seeing it start to unravel, roll out, hey, Lord, please, we got to get out of here. Pray that it's not winter. All right. So, and then he goes into the third kind of phase of this discourse. You have the beginning of sorrows, beginning part of the tribulation. You have the middle part of the tribulation with the Antichrist. Now, verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such was not the world this time, no, nor ever shall be. So now the last 3.5 years is just going to get really, really crazy, really crazy. And if those days weren't shortened to that length of period, would anyone be saved? What's the likelihood of that? He goes on to describe again the false teaching that you can anticipate during this time period, verse 23, 24, 25. He says, if anyone says they're the Christ, don't believe him, because when I come, you won't miss it. That's what he's saying. Verse 27, for as the lightning comes out of the east, shines even at the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So when I come at the Revelation, he's saying you can't miss it. So if you're questioning, it's not me. If there's even if any doubt, it's not me. Don't listen. It's false teachers. So he describes that, and then he talks about the end of the tribulation with the Son of Man coming to the earth. He talks more about the conditions of it there, verse 36 and following. And of course, he encourages us to get ready for it, to get ready for the second coming, variety of parables and so on. So anyway, the point I want to make here with this group of passages is wars and rumors of wars, Israel being at the focus. I just see where we could be really, really close. So right now, Jude is going down one path to talk about the common salvation, then he shifts gear and talks about these other topics. We may be going down and doing life as a church or life as a family, and we may have a month from now or 6 weeks from now where the whole landscape's changed. The whole landscape's changed. Right now I've got a book I'm writing. I've been working on it for 3 years. I'm getting closer. Hopefully I can do hopefully this summer you'll get a taste of it, a little section of it. and it's a good book in the sense of a topic and whatever. But when you look at these type of issues, it pales in comparison. It just doesn't. There's probably other things I should be doing, than writing about mountains in the Bible. Okay, and that's a great subject, but we may be in more of a survival mode. What I wasn't here in 1929, nor were you, but what happens if we have an economic collapse? What's that look like? Talking about being the city manager, I don't know what you do as a city when all of a sudden people are out of work and people are jumping out of buildings and the banks have caved in and there's not food, and I don't know what that looks like. We read about it in history, but we could very, very easily have something, And again, I don't want to be a doomsayer. I'm not living by fear. I'm not trying to be sensational. I'm just being realistic. We could see some very interesting things in our lifetime. I think we would see personally, but things seemingly are happening very fast, very fast. So any comments on this passage, then we'll shift gears to another section here. Any comments on all of the discourse or questions on it?
I got like a million questions, but we don't have time in the next.
Pick a couple, Mark. Seriously, go ahead.
If I could back up,
Yeah.
you talked about, as we're kind of walking through this, about this, this opportunity for everyone to hear the word.
Yes.
And I just wanted to ask, has anybody watched the movie documentary that's out, Jesus Revolution?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it any good and is it recommended?
I was invited to go to it last week and couldn't, and probably should go and see it because people are asking.
Well, and the reason that I bring that up is that, if I understand it, it's about this, kind of revival or rebirth with, call it Gen Xers, or not Gen Xers, Gen Yers, Gen Zers, and this growing sense of Christianity, at least in America. Is that what you got out of it?
Yes, it's fairly accurate. And I know that because my neighbors were there and they saw the movie and they said, this is true, this is true, this is true. It's something that you can bring your children to. There's some references to, sex, drugs, rock and roll. That was the 60s back then. And then suddenly this guy, the pastor says he's in a dead church, dead, like graveyard dead church. And he challenges his daughter, bring me one of them hippies. I'll show you they're wrong. And she brought him this hippie who was a Jesus freak. And just began a revolution. Okay. For me, it was worth seeing.
What is it based on the 60s, on the Jesus Revolution?
It was the it documents the Jesus
So it's not
Revolution.
current.
It was a history.
It's a
That's the 60s.
Yes, it was a documentary with some artistic
Sure.
liberty.
The liberties, sure,
Liberties,
sure. So that would have been the hippie movement. A lot of different things happened in the 60s in Christendom. Major shifts were happening then, and that's about that. Okay. I wondered.
But this talks about how the enemy will come within the church, and the main character in this, the Jesus freak or the Jesus Revolution movie, is going to end up. They don't tell you this in the movie, but if you do the research on this person, he ended up being he was a homosexual. He remained a homosexual, and he died a homosexual. And the movie doesn't tell you that. So that speaks about how
Didn't impact change.
yes, but God used them, right?
Yeah. So history of revivals, there's always wildfire with them. The real revivals, there's real work of God. But there seems to always be some residual wildfire stuff, emotionalism, whatever. Most revivals, mission movements start on college campuses. You had the Holy Club at Oxford, kind of after their movement. That was 1728 to 1735. You have the Cambridge Seven, huge awakening at Cambridge. You have the St. Andrew's Seven in Scotland. Our colleges early on, even at Harvard, and some of the New England stuff. The question you bring up to me is, if it's a genuine work of God, is there change that lasts? Is there impact on the community? The revivals in the 20s, 30s, the prohibition came into play because of revivals. Okay, it didn't last long, but man, the preaching was so hot on sin and hell and drinking and public sins.
Mhm.
They shut everything down. I mean, they got serious,
Yeah,
So,
wow.
so whatever. Okay, keep going. Another question.
Yeah, I mean, and
No,
so,
Betsy, try.
this struggle in the Middle East, and, this churning, but, I got to see it first and front and center, multiple times. And, I struggle with, Israel, God's chosen people, Arabs and the Muslim faith born out of that Arab culture, descendants of Abraham, the conflict. Think about, Sunni Shia conflict inside the Muslim faith,
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, Iran and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, does the unraveling, if you will, happen in the Middle East?
Yes. Yeah. Terrible unraveling. That Antichrist character is going to have this is Satan's very best product ever. Okay. So this political leader, is going to unite different groups of people, different groups, including the Muslims, including liberal Christendom, including Catholicism, including whatever. He's going to be the mass ecumenical unifier. So there's a unifying there, and I think with a Muslim, I think his appeal, he's going to claim to be the Mahdi. So if you're familiar with the Shiites and the Shia. The Shiites, they are looking for a descendant of Muhammad to come to reign and rule the world, and he's called the Mahdi. And he's the political leader, and he has a prophet with him named Jesus. So the theology of the Shiite branch believes in a political one world leader and a religious one world leader, and that's Jesus, Muslim Jesus, because Jesus didn't die. So they believe he was, great prophet. And they believe that Judas died on the cross. Jesus never died. He is coming back, and he will line up with Mahdi. I think Antichrist will play those themes with the Muslim people. So there's going to be that unifying on the wrong side. But I think what you're also going to see on the gospel side is Muslims hearing the gospel and getting the scriptures to them, and the Holy Spirit working in magnificent ways. Where now you're seeing our Muslim friends coming to know Jesus in great numbers. That would not surprise me at all, because it tells you in Revelations, it talks about people getting saved from every tribe, every kindred, every people group. So that encouraged me. That's a mission encouragement. Boy, there's going to be people saved from every walk of life and religious system. They're going to come to Christ, especially in the tribulation. So yeah, I think there's going to be a huge unifying around two people. One will be the Christ and the gospel that's going to be presented to all. And then those who reject that are going to come over here, and they're going to be deceived incredibly by Antichrist, and they're going to follow him to their doom. So the Mideast is, as you know more than all of us, how complicated it is, because what he's saying, those two groups, Saudi Sunni, Iran Shiite. I mean, they don't like each other. They hate each other. So the Shiites are the ones who the book of Quran, wrote a book on the Quran. The book of Quran, it's no prophecies. It's useless on prophecy. But the followers of Muhammad later wrote prophecies that kind of got canonized. And so the end times for the Shiites, eschatology wise, is that Syria, that Israel will be attacked from Syria and Iran. So that's part of their prophecies. And Jerusalem will go down just like it went down under Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. So in their prophecy, Jerusalem is going to be destroyed completely and totally governed by the Muslim people. And they believe that. And there's different signs that go along with their prophecies. And the Antichrist is going to play that, draw right in. I'm the Mahdi. I'm your Mahdi. I'm the guy. So there's some incredible stuff. The Shia group is not that much in the prophecy. The leader of Islam can be someone outside of a descendant of Muhammad. That's the big issue between the groups politically, is Shiites, it has to be a direct descendant of Muhammad. The caliphate has to be governed by that guy. It can't be just a guy who's capable. So it's very complex over there, very complex. And that's why Christ is saying over and over, don't be deceived. Like if you're Gentile, Jew, Muslim, don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. Here's the truth. Here's what's going to come down. And it's right there staring at us. I mean, keep going.
Is there a difference in, you just talked about kind of the Shia view on the end times. What about the Sunni view on end times? And the reason I ask is.
I'm sorry, I meant Sunni. Sunni has no particular views.
No particular, okay.
Sunni, there's no prophetic blueprint that they're following. It's the Shiites. And the Sunnis are typically more of the peace with us. The Shiites are following the Quran literally, which is a war manual. Sunnis typically aren't like that to that extreme. The Shiites are just following the book. They're following their leader Muhammad, who was a mighty warrior. Whether you like it or not, he was a driven warrior and a womanizer.
And the reason I ask is I had a Bahrainian officer that I went to school with in Washington, and we were talking religion one day, and I said, so what's the end of the world look like, from your perspective? And he was a Muslim, and he said, oh, Mark, I don't want to talk to you about that. And I said, no, really? I said, because from a Christian point of view, I don't care who you are. If you accept Christ as your personal savior, you're gonna go to heaven, live eternally with Christ. It's gonna be wonderful. And he was like, Mark, I don't want to talk to you about that. And I said, come on, tell me what's going on. And he said, well, the Muslims kill all the Jews and Christians, and it's over, and we win. And I was like, yeah, that's not so good. Yeah.
That's more dominantly pronounced by the Shiites, maybe the Sunnis quietly.
Yeah.
But that is their theology. That's their end game. It's total. You have the 99 names of Allah. None of them are love. It's all war and it's justice, whatever. So yeah, that's the end game. And those prophecies I'm describing lead to total world control. And you need to repent and become a Muslim or you burn. It's off of your head. It's one or the other. And that's exactly how it ends.
Yeah. Not a very loving perspective on life, is it?
No, it's dreadful. It's dreadful. Troy, go ahead.
So one or two questions ago, Mark was talking about it says that the word will be preached in all the world for a witness until all the nations, and then the ends come. There's a theology, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's something like Kingdom Now, or there's a name, but it's the idea that we as Christendom will evangelize the world so that the word gets into every nation, and then Jesus can return. So sort of this mixed up thinking.
Yeah, it is mixed up, and that's some of the false end times teaching. You're going to hear people say, "We are seeing Scripture fulfilled. We just got Bibles into Sudan or wherever, and we are that much closer to ushering Jesus's return."
Do you know the name of that theology?
False.
Start with false.
No.
It's not.
Unfortunately, our end times view, we believe in these different points. Unfortunately, different other groups, cults in particular, like a Jehovah's Witness, believes in some of this stuff, but they twist it. So we get a lot of guilt by association, a lot of wild stuff. I hear something nearly crazy every week about where they take a passage and they've misapplied it end times, and you say, oh, it's like a chalkboard. Please don't do that. So it is theologically, it would be a spin-off or an application of what used to be called post-millennialism, the concept. So when it comes to millennium, the first 3 centuries of the church it was all premillennial thought. Augustine writes, City of God introduces a new theory on the end times called amillennialism, no millennium. First 3 centuries, a literal millennial reign of Christ on earth. Augustine to today, that's the dominant position. That's the position of the Catholic Church and most other denominations. So what happened is we have the Reformation, which is the rediscovering of truth, 1517, with Luther, October 31st. And then what happens is there's a rediscovering of salvation topics. And this topic, we get the end time topic. And what was happening in the 1700s and especially the 1800s, it's called the Golden Age of Missions. And it looked like, man, Christianity's conquering the world. We're making an enormous headway. And so it was a rethink on millennialism. Jesus won't come at the beginning of the millennium to set it up. We will do the work for him, the work of God in our lives. And at the end of this millennium, the gospel will have gone to everyone, and we would have won the whole world. And then we give the world to him as a gift. We present it to him at the end of the millennium, post-millennial. And that was very popular. That was Jonathan Edwards, who I revere. But his eschatology was dreadful. He wrote about the end times. He talked about 10 different groups, and he predicted the sequence in which they all would get saved. And the Muslims were the last, which would be great if they all did, but that sequence, that was post-millennial thought. It was the church, things are going to get better and better and better. But World War I blew the theologians that held that out of their boots, because we're not getting better. We just destroyed so much of mankind, and we're going to repeat it, and we're going to repeat it. Doesn't look like things are getting better. Okay. So other questions, Bart?
Do you think we're headed toward a one world banking system with these bank failures? Today they were coming out predicting more banks are going to fail.
Yeah. So again, when the Bible does, when Revelation does talk about the economic conditions of the earth, and what you have is basically poor people being governed by a few wealthy. So where does that lead? The Federal Reserve is Federal Reserve. Okay, so you go high. There's a book on that. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. Is a great read on that, on how that thing was formed. That's a fascinating read. So, and I'm not going to get into conspiracies and all what happens behind closed doors, but there could be some interest with a few folks to have a global economy and kind of circle things around that. They would surprise me, if there's that. And we got to realize that with the Antichrist, what is he leveraging for you to be a follower? So he's leveraging total fear off of your head if you don't follow and worship me. But what is the other mechanism that he's using?
Numbers you don't need.
It's totally economic. So you have to take his mark, and what is that mark used for? It's just you're just not getting tattooed up for fun. It's totally economic. You can't live without that marketing, without that banking device. Okay. So yes, there's going to be some global efforts to unify, and the Antichrist pulls it together. So all these strands, and the ultimate conspiratorist, if that's a word, is Satan himself. And he can play all these different groups, and they may not even know they're working against, God in the same way or whatever. So, but yeah, that's
kind of a little bit different topic, but back in Matthew 24, the first 14 verses or so are talking about what the world's going to be like, people are going to be like leading up to the tribulation. And then the end of 14, it says, and then the end will come. And then in 15, it seems to jump into the tribulation. And we believe in a pre-trib rapture. So why isn't the rapture mentioned is it between 14 and 15?
Yeah, no, I would put, that's a great question. I'm going to put the rapture before, really before verse 4. Oh, and let me talk about that. So, and good men differ on these things. I know that. So basically you have it, theologically, regardless of what your background is, you may not even know what you believe, but you're either premillennial, amillennial, or postmillennial. And that simply means Christ comes before the millennium. We'll talk about the details. Either comes before it, or there is no such thing, or he comes at the end of it. Okay. So if you're premillennial, that means Christ comes before he sets up his kingdom. So now that 70th year of Daniel, that last 7 years, the 70th week of Daniel. So we know there's 7 years. Revelation, man, he clicks that thing off. He talks about it and he measures it by years. He talks about it in months. He talks about it in days. It's all 7 years. So we know we have a 7-year future in front of us. So now there's 4 views regarding the tribulation as to Christ. Before the 7 years, that'd be pre-trib, premillennial. Does he come at the end of the trib? That's post-trib, premillennial. Does he come in mid-trib? That'd be mid-trib, premillennial. Does he come in what's called, a new theory is pre-wrath? We can talk about it, but pre-wrath, premillennial. So right now you have 3 millennial positions, you have 4 pre-millennial return of Christ scenarios. So the question is, okay, which one has the most scripture to support the view? And so you want to look at those views, what's the Bible say? And you look at the passages. And so I put together a study on 22 reasons why I think that there's the better position is before it. Okay. So, I do a study, I really love the study, where I take the 22 positions and I ask you to grade how airtight that is on a 4.0 scale. 4.0 meaning that is just, wow, that's really, really strong, unarguable, airtight. Well, that's a pretty good argument. I give that a 3. Or, that's a 2. Or that same argument could be used for the post-trib position. So, okay, that can't be real strong because someone else could use the same argument. So that's a 2 or 1, and some's a big fat 0. Okay. So I can give you an example, like what I was saying. I already said it. The first 3 centuries of the church, all the theologians, all the homilies, John is teaching. John has got key disciples. John the Apostle writes Revelation. He's teaching certain individuals, and they're all writing about a millennium, premillennial position, and pre-trib. They're hinting towards a pre-trib and definitely premillennial. And those guys are all writing it, every single, whether it be Polycarp, Eusebius to Lactantius, all these guys are writing. It is no question. And you can talk to guys who don't believe in premillennialism. They're at least honest to history and say it was the position. So how would you rate that position that the early church fathers holding to premillennial? How would you rate that on a 4.0 scale as from a strength of argument? What would you rate that?
4.
Okay, a 4.
I put it at 3-ish.
A 4. Okay, you put it at 3. 4. Okay, so this is called history doctrine. So we're studying how the Bible was interpreted. It's a very strong argument in the sense of, okay, here's Polycarp, who was taught by Paul, by John, and he writes it. Okay, that's pretty strong, pretty strong. The problem is, in church history, we have people who write about practices that were not true.
It's not canonized, what Polycarp said.
If you're a Catholic, I mean, they lean pretty heavily on church views, interpretation, tradition. They base a lot of weight on that. So good night. First century, there were some people that were off on things. Baptism was by immersion until the 4th century. Okay, it was pretty much the dominant practice, no question. And Catholic thought came into it. Okay, and if you need to be saved, baptism saves you. You better get it done early, like an infant. Okay? So anyway, so that was an argument. Here's a goofy one I put on there. Fred Jenkins writes with LaHaye, the Left Behind series, and they sold 25 million copies. And their position in these fictional books were pre-trib. And since they had such great success in their sales, this must prove that pre-trib position's right. What'd you give that?
0.
Okay. So I go for all these arguments. Okay, I go for all these arguments. And when you put them all together, there's no missing pieces. Okay, so I'm not hiding any passages. Say that one doesn't fit. No, they all fit. I go to post-trib position. You got missing pieces everywhere. You got missing pieces, and I can highlight what they are, and you have to wrestle with them. Okay, solve this. If you're post-trib, and Jesus comes at the end of the tribulation, and everyone is glorified at that point, then who enters into the millennium, who will reproduce during the millennium? Who does the saints judge and govern during the millennial reign if everyone's a glorified saint? Okay, so that's my post-trib guys. Give me an answer, guys, because you don't have an answer to that. Okay, there is not an answer. So now they say, well, the mid-trib settles that. Okay, you're right. So my argument for that, for my position, is good, but it's shared by 2 other people, but it's not shared by the post-trib. So I'm gonna give that a pretty strong argument, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So we probably should do that as a group sometime. If this is of interest to go for those points. Because what I like about the study is you were looking at the Bible and really interesting points. But I think, especially for the next generation, to learn how to think and analyze, I see, and I work with, I teach. The analytical mind is not there. There's not analysis. They're not thinking. They're not thinking. And God's given us good minds. Let's think and analyze. Take the information, analyze. I'm not saying about you, Seth. I think you do really, truly a good job on that. But we need to analyze and think and think. And people are so gullible and don't have good judgment. We need to do that. So, well, we really got off on some rabbit trails, good ones here. And I like to close this in prayer, but I'm just thinking we're in an interesting times. Who knows what this is going to look like?
So you sort of went down the question of, Jude was going down a path and he switched gears.
Yeah, he did.
Down a different path. And so as a church, we're going down the path of history. We may be looking to switch gears.
What
Does that look like a meeting in order? Is it a home church? Is it open?
I think it could radically change. Right now, I'm preaching through Matthew, which is fabulous. Good night. But if we have a nuclear weapon go off or we have Taiwan get blown up, I probably will change my message. I mean, I want our people not to be ignorant of what we could be going into. So that may change our preaching schedule. It may get damped up against churches, that aren't politically correct, And we love our government. I love our country. I'm going to obey man as far as I can, except not contradict God. I want to be a good citizen. But we may get persecuted. We may get the door shut someday. What do you think, Mark?
Well, just a real quick comment. Think about how destabilizing COVID and supply chain and technology has been. It's 2 or 3 years in, the car industry is just starting to return. When you think about baby formula, and the nation wanting for things. I never, I'm 50, almost 57 years old, and I never in my life thought I would walk into a grocery store in the United States of America and see bare shelves. And what worries me about that is that something like COVID has destabilized the entire world economy. And so if something like China attacks Taiwan and wipes it off the face of the earth, and there is a global war, can you imagine what that means to our lives? I'm very thankful that I know how to plant vegetables, and I can hunt, because things might get a little bit on the dicey side as far as just sustaining life. We just had a fascinating discussion with our city leadership team about critical infrastructure in the city and how it's protected.
Amen.
And where do we have gaps and what do we need to do to improve our security of infrastructure? It doesn't take a lot. I think about our water source, for Westminster, Thornton, and North Glen, coming out of Stanley Lake. One thing we got about, they gave me best case if Stanley Lake is at full capacity, and, depending upon the time of year, it's, down, so call about September, October, it's pretty low, right?
Yeah.
But if Stanley Lake is at full capacity, and this was news to me, you got about a year, maybe a year and a half at rationing, drought restrictions, about a year and a half of water for the community. Other than that, it's getting trucked in from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And if there's a regional or a national shortage, then what do you do? So it really made me think about how vulnerable we are to, some kind of tragedy, and then life as we know it can change like that. So it's scary. It really is.
Lord's going to help us whatever situation we go into. So be thankful today. All right, let me pray for us here. Mike, great having you, by the way. Let's pray. Lord,